Hello and welcome to this presentation. We're going to focus on something Jesus said to his disciples and is recorded several times in all of the Gospels. Jesus said, "If anyone wishes to come after me, he must deny himself, take up his cross and follow me." The actual title of this presentation is The Persecution of the Disciples. So perhaps we're going to see that taking up your cross and following can involve persecution. We're going to base this presentation on the reading, the passage in Matthew 10, 17 to 42. So let's just read that now. "Be on your guard. You'll be handed over to the local councils and be flogged in the synagogues. On my account you will be brought before governors and kings as witnesses to them and to the Gentiles. But when they arrest you, don't worry about what to say or how to say it. At that time you will be given what to say, for it will not be you speaking, but the Spirit of your Father speaking through you. Brother will betray brother to death, and a father his child. Children will rebel against their parents and have them put to death. You'll be hated by everyone because of me, but the one who stands firm to the end will be saved. When you are persecuted in one place, flee to another. Truly I tell you, you will not finish going through all the towns of Israel before the Son of Man comes. The student is not above the teacher, nor a servant above his master. It is enough for students to be like their teachers and servants like their masters. If the head of the house has been called Beelzebul, how much more the members of his household? So do not be afraid of them, for there is nothing concealed that will not be disclosed, or hidden that will not be made known. What I tell you in the dark, speak in the daylight. What is whispered in your ear, proclaim from the roofs. Do not be afraid of those who kill the body but cannot kill the soul. Rather be afraid of the one who can destroy both soul and body in hell. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny? Yet not one of them will fall to the ground outside your Father's care. And even the very hairs of your head are all numbered. So don't be afraid. You're worth more than many sparrows. Whoever acknowledges me before others, I will also acknowledge before my Father in heaven. But whoever disowns me before others, I will disown before my Father in heaven. Do not suppose that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I didn't come to bring peace, but a sword. I have come to turn a man against his father, a daughter against her mother, a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. A man's enemies will be members of his own household. Anyone who loves their father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. Anyone who loves their son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. Whoever does not take up their cross and follow me is not worthy of me. Whoever finds their life will lose it, and whoever loses their life for my sake will find it. Anyone who welcomes you welcomes me, and anyone who welcomes me welcomes the one who sent me. Whoever welcomes a prophet as a prophet will receive a prophet's reward, and whoever welcomes a righteous person as a righteous person will receive a righteous person's reward. And if anyone gives even a cup of cold water to one of these little ones who is my disciple, truly I tell you, that person will certainly not lose their reward." These are quite difficult words, aren't they? There's comfort in there as well, but the meaning is what we're actually going to try and uncover. So for context, let's start with context. Where was this placed? So it looks like, timing wise, John the Baptist is already in prison, and Jesus has generated large numbers of people who are coming to listen to him. Mark puts this passage towards the end of Jesus' life, but if we take Matthew and Luke's accounts more chronologically, it's possible that it's round about the middle or second half of Jesus' ministry. From what we read, it looks like it was predominantly directed to the disciples, but Luke 12 says a crowd of many thousands had gathered. Luke says Jesus began to speak first to his disciples, but as there was such a large crowd, we can assume that many heard what he was saying. Also, anyone who followed Jesus and accepted him as the Messiah was in fact a disciple, as we are today, if we accept and follow Jesus. So these words are not only for the disciples then, they are for all people, all disciples then and now, anyone who is part of God's kingdom. So what did Jesus mean? First of all, we know that we can trust every word that Jesus said was for our good. The very reason he came was for us, to save us. Everything Jesus said comes out of love for us. He was also being very clear about who he is and what his mission as the Messiah was going to look like. A very different mission to the one many assumed. Not the conquering hero, but a mission of rejection by the religious officials, and ultimately a mission that involved being put to death by the Roman rulers. So much of what Jesus says here is telling the disciples he's going to die and be resurrected. Mark 10 says, "For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." We found this statue or depiction of the cross when we were away on holiday recently. I was drawn to it because I really like that the cross is split down the middle. For me, this speaks of the cross, or the death of Jesus, as being earth-shattering. This is the death of the Son of God. But it was also earth-shattering because he defeated death and rose again. The rules of death were shattered, and in doing so, Jesus opened the way for us to be reunited with God for all eternity. So Jesus is telling the disciples what's going to happen. But it's also clear he is telling them that the same things he had been exposed to will happen to us if we follow him. Why wouldn't they? The disciples and us today are to say everything Jesus said. And Jesus was arrested, flogged and murdered because of what he said. There are some key command words in that verse that we looked at. If anyone wants to follow after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross and follow me. So you've got follow, deny, take up and then another follow. Let's look at follow first. Many of you know that our daughter Amy is getting married next year, and she is going to hopefully be married in Easingwold Church. This is because this is near to where the reception is going to be predominantly, but actually we're really pleased that she's going to be married in this church. We recently went to Easingwold, to their church, and we were actually there for their first cafe style service on a Sunday evening. As part of this, The vicar, a lovely lady called Margaret, gave her testimony. And what she said was that she'd always grown up with a belief in God. She'd never had a problem believing in God. But things changed when she felt God was calling her into ministry. She shared with us an analogy of falling in love. She quite suddenly had this feeling of falling in love with God, and she interpreted this as a calling into ministry. Her belief didn't alter, but she suddenly became aware that she was connected to God, had a relationship with Him, and so was now, if you like, following Him wherever He was going to lead her. There is a definite difference between believing and following. You can believe and not follow. Following requires something more, something deeper. The next key command word is deny. If we use the falling in love analogy again, I've heard it said that the question you should ask yourself about deciding to marry someone shouldn't be, does he make me happy? But it should rather be, can I make him happy? There's perhaps a subtle difference, but it's actually a massive difference. One is about how you feel. The other is nothing about yourself. It's all about the other person. It's denying yourself. The other person's happiness is paramount. Denying yourself is forgetting your own self-interest and putting aside your own ideas, plans, hopes and desires to concentrate fully on Jesus. If we deny ourselves or sacrifice ourselves to God, we won't worry about losing our possessions, friends, or even our family. We will belong to God, not to our things, not to our position, not to our reputation, not to our comfort. There's actually also a huge freedom in that. The hold of these things over our lives is broken. And isn't denying himself exactly what Jesus did when he died for us? He died for us to save us. It didn't matter to him about himself. It was all about his love for us. The Apostle Paul certainly got this. In Corinthians we hear how persecuted he was, how much he had to bear. From the Jews 5 times I received 40 stripes, minus 1. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I was stoned. 3 times I was shipwrecked. A night and a day I've been in the deep. In journeys often, in perils of water, in perils of robbers, in perils of my own countrymen, in perils of the Gentiles, in perils in the city, in perils in the wilderness, in perils in the sea, in perils among false brethren, in weariness and toil, in sleeplessness often, in hunger and thirst, in fasting often, in cold and nakedness. Besides the other things, what comes upon me daily, my deep concern for the churches. All these things happened to me, to Paul. It really wasn't easy. But what Paul says in Philippians is that none of that matters. Whatever gain I had, I counted as loss for the sake of Christ. Indeed, I count everything as loss because of the surpassing worth of knowing Christ Jesus, my Lord. For his sake I have suffered the loss of all things, and count them as rubbish, in order that I may gain Christ. Christ was everything. Paul is clearly in love with Christ. The other person, all of that is what matters, not the things that may happen to him. The next command we have is take up. Take up your cross. You might have heard it said that some burden or other, possibly a strained relationship or a really difficult job or even a physical illness, some people call those a cross to carry. Oh dear, this thing in my life, it's just my cross to bear. Just got to put up with it. But that's not what Jesus is saying here. He is saying, be willing to die if you have to, rather than lose the prize of following Jesus and the reward that will be heaven. It's perhaps when our true commitment to Jesus is revealed, to others and to ourselves, when we suffer persecution. Taking up your cross is an active, not a passive decision. It's also, and often should be, a public declaration. I am actively and openly seeking to go where God leads me, and I am not ashamed of doing this. Take up the cross of a bold proclamation of the gospel, even if it causes those who you are trying to share it with to ridicule and mock you and think you foolish. Even if family and friends don't want to know you because of your faith, take up the cross of perseverance. Let your love for God grow. If you've lost some of that love for God, take up the cross of repentance and restore your relationship with God. We're back to the follow again, the final command, follow. We could say, if we follow these commands, if we take up these commands, that we are being obedient. We're responding to these commands by obeying God. However, in the context of this love relationship that we've talked about, it's more about trust rather than obedience. We're not slavishly completing tasks or carrying out commands without thinking or believing in them. We're saying, I know you love me, God, and I know I love you. I want to follow you. I trust you implicitly because I know you have my best interests and my eternal safety at heart. I'm doing this because I want to make you happy, but I know you want me to be happy, safe and fulfilled. My happiness and my security for all eternity are the reason Jesus came, and he accepted persecution and death on my behalf. This slide is showing us perhaps how to trust God. But it's those things in there that are really true. We actively choose it. It means we draw closer to God. We will cry out to God. We will remember what God has done, and we will let go of the grip on our own lives. One of the things I read when I was preparing this said that suffering we endure will supercharge what we say about Jesus and why we follow him. The author of the article I read felt that when people see we gain no earthly advantage, we don't gain riches or honour or reward by being joined with Christ, but actually it's more likely that it'll bring earthly disadvantage, sometimes punishment, sometimes abuse, then they will see how sincere we are about our belief. People might actually say, if they're willing to give up so much for what they believe, then Jesus must be worth knowing. There is some truth in that, but it's not the reason for following. To actively seek to be persecuted, even if that does mean people may turn to Christ, is not what Jesus is saying here. Matthew 10:23 definitely tells us to expect persecution, but also says there's no need to seek it. When they persecute you, flee to another. Go to another place. We're also told in Matthew, Mark and Luke to be on your guard. Watch out for it. And when we are persecuted, don't worry about it, because we'll be given the words to say. When they arrest you, don't worry about what to say or how to say it. At that time you'll be given what to say, for it will be not you speaking, but the Spirit of your Father speaking through you. And there's also huge reassurance in that passage we read. We're compared to sparrows. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a cent? Yet not one of them will fall to the ground apart from your Father. But the very hairs of your head are all numbered. Don't fear, you're more valuable than many sparrows. God is in complete control, and He is there going through this with us. He is taking care of us now and for all eternity. And ultimately, if the very worst happens, if it is the worst, whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. If you give up your hold on your life, that's when you will find life. The lovely vicar in Easingwold also introduced us to Teresa of Avila. Teresa was Spanish, born in 1515 and died in 1582. At age 21, against her father's wishes, she entered a convent and became a Carmelite nun. However, it wasn't until she was 40, after a serious prolonged illness, and she was left with partial paralysis from an attempted cure, she was forced to spend 3 years in relatively quiet. And then she started to really follow Jesus. She says, one day walking down a hallway in the convent, her glance fell on a statue of the wounded Christ, and the vision of his constant love throughout her inconsistency pierced her heart. Gently but powerfully, she said, Jesus began to break down her defences and reveal himself to her. Doesn't that sound like falling in love? Doesn't that sound like going further than belief? She said some particularly amazing things, and I've collected just a few of them here. There she is. That is Teresa of Avila. She said, and this is really comforting, let nothing perturb you, nothing frighten you. All things pass. God does not change. She also said, perhaps in this context, that the feeling remains that God is on the journey too. If the journey is difficult, you're not doing it alone. God is doing it with you. I love this other one, this very short one. The closer one approaches to God, the simpler one becomes. The more you think about God, about more you put Him as the person ahead of yourself, the simpler yourself will become. And this is a real call, isn't it? A real call to action on Christ's behalf. Christ has no body now but yours, no hands, no feet on earth but yours. Yours are the eyes through which Christ looks compassion into the world. Yours are the feet with which Christ walks to do good. Yours are the hands with which Christ blesses the world. I want to leave you with this final piece that is attributed to Teresa, and I think we'll finish with it as a prayer or a blessing to take with us as we go out into this week. May today there be peace within. May you trust God that you are exactly where you're meant to be. May you not forget the infinite possibilities that are born of faith. May you use these gifts that you have received and pass on the love that has been given to you. May you be content knowing that you are a child of God. Let this presence settle into your bones and allow your soul the freedom to sing, dance, praise and love. It's there for each and every one of us.